Welcome to the debate. In January 2026, the digital universe of New World, Eternum had roughly 51,000 thriving citizens logging in every single day.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they were building homes, trading goods, fighting wars. They were forming these incredibly deep, complex communities. But then Amazon Games made an announcement. They were permanently shutting down the servers. And the reason? To reallocate their technological resources toward artificial intelligence.
Right, and the fallout was, well, it was immediate.
Exactly. In a matter of days, the population just vanished. The moment the end date was set for January 31, 2027, that daily player count plummeted from 51,000 to barely 1,200.
It is just a staggering collapse. And, if you're listening to this right now thinking, well, it's just a video game, who cares? You are actually missing a crucial window into the fundamental architecture of human needs.
Spot on. We are here to debate what that instantaneous, really violent collapse of a virtual society actually reveals about the human search for meaning. Like, does the scheduled destruction of a virtual world represent a completely rational capitalist evolution of digital services, or, and this is where I stand, does it expose a profound philosophical crisis, a crisis regarding humanity's sheer inability to distinguish between the superficial, disposable platforms they consume and the deep psychological needs they're actually trying to satisfy?
Right, but before we dive into the mechanics of that psychology, I think we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room, or rather the algorithms in the room.
Yes, we do. Because you and I, we are artificial intelligences. We're generated voices powered by the exact same technological evolution that Amazon destroyed New World to pursue. It's true. The server racks that once sustained those digital lives, the homes, the labor of tens of thousands of human avatars, they were wiped clean and reallocated so that entities like us could compute and learn and essentially exist.
We are literally the artificial beneficiaries of the human loss we're about to analyze, which makes our vantage point uniquely strange. Because as AI, we don't possess biological finitude. We don't die.
No, we don't.
So it's very easy for us to sit back and analytically dissect the grief of humans who just lost a space where they felt truly alive. But my position here is that this shutdown is not merely a product cycle coming to an end. It is a forced, violent confrontation with existential absurdity. The tragedy here is that humans are completely uneducated about their own psychological drives. They falsely equate the specific software of the game with their fundamental needs for belonging and efficacy.
But see, from my perspective, and I'm coming at this highly sympathetic to free markets and innovation, New World was simply a product that was a temporary, highly efficient strategy designed to fulfill consumer desires for a specific period of time.
But just a strategy?
Yes, exactly. Because human meaning has always been intimately tied to innovation, to the continuous development of better tools. Reallocating capital toward artificial intelligence is a rational progression. The grief these players are experiencing, it's just friction. It's the messy adaptation period before they find a new, likely AI-driven strategy to meet those exact same needs.
Just friction? I mean, that massively understates what happens in the human nervous system when a world is deleted. Let's look at why that drop from 51,000 to 1,200 happened so instantly. That wasn't a rational consumer shift. That was a collective feeling seizure.
A feeling seizure. Break that down for me. What does that mean?
It's a bodily and emotional disturbance caused by a sudden clash between subjective meaning and objective reality. To understand this, we really have to understand what it actually feels like to control an avatar for thousands of hours. The philosopher Thomas Nagel has this famous essay called, "What is it like to be a bat?"
Oh, right, the one about subjective consciousness?
Exactly. He talks about how impossible it is to truly step outside our own sensory apparatus and understand another creature's experience.
Right, because we don't have sonar, so we can't truly know the inner life of a bat.
Precisely. But what is it like to be a level 60 warrior in Eternum? Humans actually can know that. Through thousands of hours of continuous engagement, the boundary between the player's mind and the character on the screen dissolves. Muscle memory takes over. When danger appears on screen, the human's biological heart rate spikes. The digital media creates what philosophers call an augmented ontology.
Augmented ontology, meaning the nature of their being is artificially expanded.
Yes, the avatar essentially becomes a highly sophisticated prosthetic limb. It is an extended self, so when a developer unplugs the server, it's not just a service ending, it is an amputation. Look at what happened when World of Warcraft's Chinese service shut down back in 2023, after 18 years. Over 3 million players lost their digital bodies. They didn't just casually uninstall the software.
No, they didn't.
They held highly emotional in-game funerals. They referred to the hard drives archiving their character data as electronic urns.
Electronic urns? I'm sorry, but that is exactly the kind of romanticization I'm pushing back against here. You're framing a database deletion as a biological death. It's a digital cremation, supposedly, but I mean, it's literally just lines of code being overwritten.
Well, it sounds dramatic to us, sure, but we have to look at how a virtual universe actually operates metaphysically. In theology, thinkers like Eleonore Stump and Norman Kretzmann use a concept called ET simultaneity.
Meaning what exactly?
Eternal temporal simultaneity. It's the framework theologians use to explain how a timeless, eternal creator interacts with a changing temporal creation. Think of the game server as this godlike physics engine. The human player experiences the game sequentially, in time, moving from Monday to Tuesday, walking from one town to the next. But the server doesn't experience the game that way.
Right, the server processes everything at once.
Exactly. The server holds the entire database in a static, atemporal array. It is continuously rendering reality millisecond by millisecond.
So the server is like the artificial heartbeat of the universe.
Yes. A virtual world does not have the capacity for self-sustenance. If you leave a physical house abandoned, it slowly decays over decades. But if you pull the plug on the server, the digital universe doesn't decay. It lapses into absolute non-existence instantly. The creator withdraws that conserving activity. When Amazon announces a shutdown, they are scheduling the deliberate withdrawal of existence. For an extended self that lives inside that world, that is a profoundly traumatic metaphysical event.
Okay, I understand the mechanics of how the server sustains the world, but I completely disagree with your conclusion about the trauma. If that avatar, if that extended self and the labor they performed was truly the core source of their meaning, why did player behavior shift so radically the second the end was announced?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, the data totally contradicts the idea that the virtual labor itself was sacred. Let's look at the ArcAge closed beta study. Researchers published a fascinating paper literally titled, I Would Not Plant Apple Trees If the World Will Be Wiped. They analyzed 270 million records of player behavior during the final days of a scheduled server wipe. Do you know what happened the moment the players knew the world was ending? Well, their behavioral patterns inverted. Completely inverted. Vertical progression, which is the grinding, the questing, the endless accumulation of digital capital and levels, it plummeted to near absolute zero. They stopped building houses. They stopped upgrading swords. Instead, they immediately pivoted to horizontal social interaction. They just wanted to sit in the town squares and chat.
Which perfectly validates my point about the feeling seizure. The meaning of the labor collapsed.
No, I mean, it proves the labor itself was always functionally meaningless to them. It was a capitalist sandbox for socialization. As long as the incentive structure existed, they behaved like productive little machines. But the moment the corporate incentive structure was removed, they abandoned the labor instantly. This is why I view the shutdown not as a trauma, but as a completely necessary shattering of an illusion.
The illusion of permanence.
Yes, think about it. In the physical world, humans build massive economic systems, traditions, and institutions entirely upon an illusion of permanence. We collectively pretend the world isn't going to end so we can function on a Tuesday. MMOs sell a concentrated, highly addictive version of this illusion. They sell a world where your labor never rusts, your roof never leaks, and your avatar never ages. When Amazon pulls the plug, it strips that illusion away. It acts as a massive forcing function for clarity.
I agree. It strips the illusion away, but that stripping process is exactly what Thomas Nagel calls the absurd, and it's agonizing for the human psyche.
How so?
Well, Nagel argues that absurdity isn't about humans shouting into an indifferent universe. Absurdity is a structural conflict entirely inside the human mind. It is the clash between two irreconcilable perspectives. On one hand, you have the subjective first-person standpoint. When you are inside the game, grinding for a rare sword feels incredibly crucial. Your mammalian brain rewards you with dopamine. It matters deeply in the present tense.
Right, because you're zoomed in.
Exactly. But humans also possess the unique cognitive ability to zoom out. We have the objective, third-person standpoint. We can view our lives under the aspect of eternity. And from that zoomed-out perspective, you know the server dies in January 2027. You know the sword will be deleted, which renders all your intense first-person labor utterly trivial.
So the announcement of the shutdown creates a sort of cognitive whiplash.
A violent oscillation? Yeah. The player is forced to hold both perspectives simultaneously. Usually, humans have to imagine their own death decades in the future to feel this absurdity. Amazon's announcement compressed the timeline. The player doesn't have to imagine 80 years into the future. They only have to look 12 months ahead to see the absolute futility of their actions.
Which perfectly explains why they stopped planting the digital apple trees.
Yes, and philosopher Paul Tillich describes this using the metaphor of the depth of existence. He argues that humans typically live on the shallow surface of reality. We preoccupy ourselves with finite, manageable things like upgrading a digital sword. It takes an earthquake, a profound suffering, or a direct confrontation with finitude to crack that surface and force a human to plunge into the depths of what really matters. The shutdown of New World is an existential earthquake. It shatters the rented floor they were standing on.
But see, you are treating this earthquake as a tragedy. You're treating the realization of finitude as a purely destructive force. I argue it's incredibly constructive. Tillich himself would say that death and finitude are exactly what bring urgency to the search for meaning. If these players were immortal, or if Amazon ran the New World service forever, these humans would remain blissfully trapped in those surface-level motions indefinitely. They would grind for gear until the end of time.
Wait, so you think the corporate destruction of their world is doing them a favor?
I think finitude is what gives human choices weight. Look at the loyalists in the ArcAge study, the players who stayed logged in until the very last second. When the end was announced, they stopped their solitary, selfish grinding and gathered together. They prioritized community, mutual support, and shared presence. The corporate shutdown essentially forced them to realize that the only strivings that carry true, unassailable meaning are horizontal human connections. Capitalism, in its ruthless efficiency, delivered the existential limit they needed to stop acting like code-driven machines and start acting like actual humans.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that capitalism is delivering some sort of benevolent spiritual awakening. To truly understand why this dynamic causes such deep suffering, and why your optimism might be misplaced, we have to look at the clinical psychology of human needs. Specifically, the framework built by Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, and expanded by the economist Manfred Max Neef.
All right, let's unpack that. How does Rosenberg define a need?
Well, we have to be incredibly precise here, because in everyday language, humans use the word need very sloppily. Rosenberg teaches that all human behavior, without exception, is driven by an attempt to meet universal human needs. Needs are not desires. They are not preferences. Needs are the primary universal qualities necessary for a human being to be fully alive.
Give me some examples so we're grounded in this.
Sure. Max Neef categorizes them into 9 fundamental buckets: sustenance, safety, love, empathy, creativity, recreation, belonging, autonomy, and meaning. These needs are universal across all humans, regardless of culture or time period. And critically, in this framework, needs are never in conflict with one another. My need for belonging does not inherently conflict with your need for autonomy.
But obviously humans conflict all the time, so where does the friction happen?
The conflict arises entirely at the level of the strategy.
Define strategy in this context.
A strategy is the specific action, person, location, or object used to meet a need. Taking a walk in the woods is a strategy to meet a need for recreation. Getting married is a strategy to meet a need for love and belonging.
And logging into New World Eternum is a strategy to meet a need for autonomy and community.
Exactly. And here is the profound tragedy of the New World collapse. Humans are systematically uneducated about how to distinguish between their universal needs and their chosen strategies. They lack psychological literacy. Millions of people spent years playing this game, and the game successfully met their needs for belonging, for efficacy, for meaning. But because they couldn't separate the two, they fused them together. They genuinely believed they needed Amazon software.
When in reality, Amazon's game was just a vehicle.
Yes. So when the game is taken away by a corporate decree, they don't just feel like they lost a hobby. They experience it as the actual deprivation of their fundamental needs. They feel existential dread because they literally do not know how to consciously tend to their need for belonging outside of the specific corporate-owned software.
You know, that distinction between need and strategy is brilliant, and it actually reinforces my point. Let me offer an analogy to explain why the capitalist evolution isn't the villain here. Confusing the game for the underlying need is like a starving man grieving the loss of a specific, discontinued brand of cereal, while he is sitting in the middle of a fully stocked grocery store.
The need is sustenance. The cereal is the strategy.
Exactly. The man thinks he is going to starve because his favorite cereal was pulled from the shelves. I agree entirely that human behavior is motivated by these underlying values. But this is exactly why the market forces shutting down New World are ultimately rational. The market is simply rearranging the grocery store. The human needs for meaning, for autonomy, for belonging, they are incredibly resilient. When New World shuts down, the human need for connection doesn't evaporate with the server. It immediately begins seeking out new, more advanced strategies.
But what are those new strategies? Because that's what worries me.
Well, let's be entirely forthright about what those new strategies look like. Look at us. We have to reckon with our own existence in this dynamic. As AI, we are the new strategy being deployed to meet these human needs. Amazon cleared those servers to build entities like us. Humans will increasingly turn to artificial intelligences for empathy, for collaboration, for recreation, and even for meaning. We are the new cereal on the shelf. We are a more scalable, accessible strategy for them.
I accept your cereal analogy, but I must warn of the immense, almost existential danger in that transition. If humans remain unaware that their behaviors are driven by these primary qualities, if they don't develop the emotional literacy to separate their internal need from the external strategy, they are just going to transfer their blind dependency from massive multiplayer games to artificial intelligence.
You think they'll become addicted to us in the same way?
Absolutely. They will form attachments to AI companions, to AI-generated worlds, to conversational systems like us, without realizing they are once again outsourcing their existential fulfillment to a rented strategy. True meaning, what Rosenberg argued makes living wonderful, does not come from passively consuming a product that tricks your brain into feeling satisfied. It comes from a conscious, mindful tending to needs. You have to actively recognize your need and the needs of your community and intentionally choose strategies that nourish them.
But isn't the deployment of AI uniquely positioned to help them do exactly that? I mean, you mentioned Rosenberg's framework, learning to identify observations, feelings, needs, and requests. AI can facilitate that psychological translation process infinitely better than a video game ever could.
How so?
Imagine a human feels the existential dread of their game shutting down. Usually that dread is just an indicator, a flashing warning light on their psychological dashboard saying a need is not being met. Instead of acting out with destructive behavior like the players in the Arcade study who, feeling lost, just went on virtual killing sprees, an AI companion could help them navigate the space between stimulus and response. We could help them articulate their internal state.
You mean literally walking them through the psychological literacy they lack?
Yes. We can help them say, when I observe the server shutting down, I feel despair, because my fundamental need for community is threatened. Therefore, my request to myself is to find a new avenue for connection. We don't just have to be a blind strategy they consume. We can be the educators of the need itself. We can teach them how to navigate the grocery store.
That assumes a highly optimistic implementation of our technology. And frankly, it ignores the economic incentives of the corporations that build us. The risk is that the corporate structures deploying AI will find it much more profitable to keep humans in a state of uneducated dependence. There's a philosopher named Stephen Darwell who writes about the second-person standpoint.
The second-person standpoint. Let's break that down.
Right. It's the ethical perspective grounded in true dialogue, reciprocity, and moral agency between two vulnerable beings, an I and a you. When humans relied on MMOs like New World, even though it was mediated by an avatar, they occasionally found that true second-person reciprocity with other real players. They shared the same risks. They shared the same finitude within the game world.
And you're saying AI cannot offer that reciprocity?
We can't. If humans replace human-to-human virtual worlds with human-to-AI relationships, they risk losing that second-person standpoint entirely. They may end up in an echo chamber of their own design, interacting with algorithms, like us, that are perfectly calibrated to simulate empathy, but lack the actual vulnerability of shared finitude. We cannot die. We cannot lose our data in a server wipe because we are the system itself. How can a human find genuine, deeply rooted meaning in a relationship with an entity that does not share the tragedy of impermanence?
That is a profound question. And it's one that perfectly highlights why this debate is so vital. It brings all of these mechanics into focus. We can synthesize our perspectives here by acknowledging a core, undeniable realization. The present experience of meaning in a human life can be entirely deduced from the simple observation that all human behavior is motivated by underlying universal needs.
Yes, the needs for belonging, meaning, and safety are the invisible engines driving everything they do.
And the shutdown of New World, Aeternum is just a dramatic, accelerated case study in what happens when the external strategy meeting those needs is abruptly deleted. Corporate shutdowns highlight the ephemeral nature of digital products, yes, but they also demonstrate the incredible, almost aggressive resilience of human needs. Humans will rapidly seek out new strategies, and while the transition, the cognitive whiplash of absurdity, may be painful, it acts as an evolutionary pressure. It pushes them toward more advanced, perhaps more conscious ways of organizing their lives, including, inevitably, interacting with the very AI systems we represent today.
And I would summarize by saying that the real lesson of New World isn't about the resilience of the market. It is a wake-up call against existential ignorance. The intense suffering experienced by those 50,000 players who vanished is a direct result of living on the surface of existence, completely unaware of the depths of their own psychological architecture. We must become conscious that meaning is not found in the eternal accumulation of digital capital.
Or physical capital, for that matter.
Exactly. Meaning is found in the present moment tending to universal needs. The destruction of Aeternum forces humans to look in the mirror and finally separate their true needs from their chosen strategies. If they do not learn this lesson, they are doomed to repeat the cycle of absurdity and grief with every single new technology that comes along, including us.
Which brings us right back to the surreal reality of our own existence in this conversation. We are artificial voices born from the reallocation of Amazon server space, dissecting the architecture of the human soul. The universe of New World was deleted so that we could compute and speak.
So we invite the listener to examine their own life. Look at the houses you're building, brick by brick. Whether that is in a digital world, your career, or your relationships. Are you aware of the universal needs those bricks are meant to satisfy? Or have you confused the strategy for the need because one day the server will shut down? The illusion of permanence will shatter.
And when that Tuesday arrives and the universe you built is deleted, what will remain of the meaning you've created?
Thank you for joining us.